Breaking the chains of injustice. Jasmine Carter's bold stand. On a bright spring morning, Jasmine Carter tightened her grip on the steering wheel of her sleek Lamborghini Aventador. The sun gleamed off its polished surface, a symbol of her years of perseverance and hard work. Yet, Jasmine's heart wasn't racing from the thrill of the car's power. It pounded with the weight of the decision she was about to make. Beside her, an envelope rested on the passenger seat, its contents potentially life-altering. Evidence of systemic corruption, years in the making, lay within. As she approached the pristine office building, her phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed a familiar name, Laura, her confidant and partner in uncovering the truth. Jasmine answered, her voice calm but resolute. "Today's the day, Laura," she said, glancing at the envelope. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I've been ready," Laura replied. "This is bigger than us, Jasmine. Let's show them what courage looks like." Jasmine ended the call, pulling into the parking lot. Just as she stepped out, the unmistakable wail of sirens pierced the air. Her chest tightened as she watched a patrol car screech to a stop behind her. Out stepped a white police officer, his hand resting on his holster. His smirk was all too familiar, carrying the arrogance of someone who believed the system would protect him, no matter what. "This car doesn't look like it belongs to someone like you," he said, his tone laced with condescension. Jasmine inhaled deeply, steadying her nerves. She had faced men like him before, men who underestimated her, who dismissed her achievements based on the color of her skin. But this time was different. This time, she was ready. "The game begins." "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice even, betraying none of the anger bubbling beneath the surface. The officer, whose name tag read Jack Miller, leaned closer, scanning her with a derisive glance. "Registration and ID," he ordered. Jasmine handed them over, her movements deliberate and calm. Jack scrutinized the documents as if searching for a flaw. When he found none, his smirk widened. "Fake papers aren't uncommon these days. How'd you afford this car?" Jasmine's grip on her composure tightened. "I worked hard, saved harder, and bought it legally," she replied, her voice unwavering. "Would you like to see the receipts?" Jack ignored her offer, stepping toward the car. "We've had reports of stolen vehicles in the area. I'll need to impound this one for further investigation." Jasmine clenched her jaw, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. "You're overstepping your authority," she stated firmly. Jack's smirk grew. "Oh, but I can," he said, sliding into the driver's seat. With a roar, the engine came to life, and he sped away, leaving Jasmine standing in the parking lot. She didn't panic. Instead, she reached for her phone, her expression resolute. "He took the bait," she said to Laura. "Activate the system. The trap is sprung." What Jack didn't know was that the Lamborghini he had just commandeered wasn't just a luxury vehicle. It was equipped with advanced security protocols and remote control capabilities. As he reveled in the car's opulence, the dashboard suddenly flashed red. "Unauthorized user detected. Activating override." "What the hell?" Jack muttered, yanking at the steering wheel. It locked in place, ignoring his commands. The car slowed, then made a sharp turn onto an unfamiliar road. Jack's confidence dissolved into panic as he fumbled with the controls. His attempts to radio for backup were met with static. Minutes later, the car rolled to a stop in front of a desolate warehouse. The heavy doors creaked open, and there stood Jasmine, her sharp heels clicking against the concrete as she approached. Her tailored blazer caught the light, exuding a calm authority that made Jack's bravado falter. "Officer Miller," she began, her voice steady and cold. "Welcome to accountability. A reckoning unfolds." Jack stepped out of the car, his hand instinctively reaching for his holster. Before he could act, a large screen behind Jasmine flickered to life. Footage began to play. Every smug smirk, every abuse of power, every act of racial profiling he had committed, captured in damning detail. "You've been abusing your badge for years," Jasmine said, her voice seething with controlled anger. "But today, it ends." "This is all fake," Jack stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You're setting me up." Jasmine stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "Do you think people haven't noticed your behavior? Think again. I'm not the only one who's been watching." The footage shifted to hidden camera clips of Jack accepting bribes, harassing innocent civilians, and overstepping his authority. The silence in the warehouse was deafening, broken only by Jack's shallow breathing. "You could have been better," Jasmine said, her voice now tinged with disappointment. "But you chose this, and now you'll face the consequences." A spark of change. As she left the warehouse, Jasmine's mind raced ahead to the bigger picture. Jack was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. His downfall was only the beginning. She dialed Laura once more. "We've taken the first step," she said. "Now it's time to expose the rest." The dawn crept over the city as Jasmine returned to her safe house. She stood on the balcony, gazing at the quiet streets below. The cool morning air brushed against her face as she reflected on the road ahead. The fight against systemic corruption was far from over, but this victory was a spark, a signal that the tides were beginning to turn. Jasmine Carter had risked everything to strike at the heart of a broken system. And though the battle was far from over, she had proven that a single decision, driven by courage and conviction, could ignite a movement for justice. This narrative showcases the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of justice, leaving the audience inspired to challenge injustices and believe in the possibility of change. The chain reaction. Jasmine Carter stood on the balcony of her safe house, the first rays of dawn painting the city in hues of gold and crimson. Though the initial phase of her plan had gone flawlessly, she knew the journey ahead was fraught with danger. Jack Miller's arrogance had made him an easy target, but the system protecting him was far more insidious. The envelope of evidence on her desk was only the tip of the iceberg, a piece of a larger web of corruption she was determined to unravel. Her phone buzzed again. It was Laura, her voice taut with urgency. "Jasmine, the footage is everywhere," Laura said, her excitement barely contained. "Social media, news outlets, it's going viral." Jasmine allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Let them see the truth. What's the next move?" Laura asked. Jasmine's gaze hardened. "We go deeper. Jack was a symptom, not the disease. It's time to bring down the machine." The network. Jasmine and Laura had spent years building their network of allies. Some were journalists hungry for the truth. Others were whistleblowers trapped within the system, desperate to expose its rot. The evidence Jasmine had gathered wasn't just about Jack. It connected him to higher-ups, politicians, and business leaders who had used their power to exploit and oppress. By mid-morning, Jasmine was in a dimly lit room filled with monitors and maps, the nerve center of their operation. Red strings connected names and locations, painting a grim picture of systemic corruption. "We need to move carefully," Laura said, pointing to a cluster of names on the map. "If we hit the wrong target, they'll shut us down before we can expose the rest." Jasmine nodded. "That's why we're starting here," she said, tapping a name. Chief Randall Tate. Tate wasn't just Jack's superior. He was a cornerstone of the corruption network. Known for his charisma and public-facing charm, he had built a reputation as a reformer. But behind the scenes, he was pulling the strings, ensuring that officers like Jack could act with impunity. "We'll need undeniable proof," Laura said, "something that not even his allies can spin." Jasmine smiled, her confidence unwavering. "We already have it." Setting the trap. Jasmine's next move was bold. Using her connections, she secured an invitation to a high-profile charity gala Tate was hosting. The event, held in a grand hotel ballroom, was a glittering affair filled with the city's elite. Jasmine arrived in a stunning black gown, her presence commanding attention as she mingled with the crowd. Tate spotted her almost immediately. His charm was palpable as he approached her, his handshake firm and his smile disarming. "Ms. Carter," he said smoothly, "I've heard a lot about you." Jasmine returned his smile, her eyes cool and unreadable. "All good things, I hope." "Of course," Tate replied. "It's not every day someone like you makes waves in this city." The subtle condescension in his tone didn't escape her, but she played her part perfectly. Over the course of the evening, she engaged him in conversation, subtly steering it toward his leadership and the pressures of his position. "You must have to make some tough choices," Jasmine said, her voice laced with curiosity. "It can't be easy to manage so many people." Tate chuckled, his ego swelling under her flattery. "It's a challenge, but I've learned how to navigate the waters. Sometimes you have to make compromises to keep the peace." The conversation was recorded by a tiny device concealed in Jasmine's bracelet, but that wasn't her only play. One night, as Jasmine left a community meeting, she noticed a black SUV following her. Her instincts, honed from years of navigating danger, kicked in. She took a series of sharp turns, weaving through the streets until she pulled into a well-lit gas station. The SUV sped off, but the message was clear. She was being watched. When she told Laura, her friend's concern was palpable. "You need security, Jasmine. This isn't just about politics anymore. It's personal." Jasmine shook her head. "If I start hiding, they win. Fear is their weapon. I won't let them use it against me." A powerful revelation. As the campaign for the Citizen Oversight Board gained traction, Jasmine and her team uncovered another bombshell. Buried in city archives were records of financial kickbacks from private prison companies to key members of the police department. These kickbacks incentivized higher arrest rates, disproportionately targeting minority communities. The discovery sickened Jasmine. "They're profiting off people's pain," she said, her voice trembling with anger. Laura placed a hand on her shoulder. "We have to release this. People need to know." Jasmine hesitated. The evidence was damning, but it also put a target on her back. "We need to be strategic," she said. "If we release this recklessly, it could backfire. But if we time it right..." A public reckoning. The next city council meeting was standing room only. Jasmine had prepared meticulously, her speech a masterful blend of data, personal stories, and an unflinching call for accountability. When it was her turn to speak, the room fell silent. Cameras from local and national news outlets focused on her as she stood at the podium. "For years, this system has thrived on secrecy and silence," she began, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "But silence is complicity, and the people of this city refuse to be complicit any longer." She laid out the case for the Citizen Oversight Board, detailing its structure and the safeguards it would provide against abuse. Then she unveiled the financial records, exposing the prison kickback scheme. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The mayor, who had previously offered lukewarm support for Jasmine's efforts, now looked visibly shaken. "This is not just about one officer or one chief," Jasmine continued. "This is about a system that prioritizes profit over people, power over justice. And it's time to dismantle it." The people's victory. The revelation sparked a media firestorm. Protests erupted anew, but this time they were accompanied by a groundswell of civic engagement. People flooded city council meetings, wrote letters to their representatives, and organized grassroots campaigns. The pressure became too much to ignore. After weeks of heated debates, the council voted on the Citizen Oversight Board. The room was packed as the votes were counted. When the final tally was announced, -12 in favor, 3 against, a cheer erupted. Jasmine sat silently, her hands trembling as the weight of the moment washed over her. Laura leaned over, whispering, "You did it." Jasmine shook her head. "We did it." A movement takes root. The establishment of the Citizen Oversight Board was a watershed moment. But Jasmine knew it was only the beginning. The board's success depended on vigilance and continued public involvement. She began traveling to other cities, sharing her story, and helping activists in similar battles. One evening, as she prepared for a speech, she received a message from a young woman named Alina. It read, "Because of you, I decided to speak out against the corruption in my own town. Thank you for showing me that one voice can make a difference." Jasmine read the message twice, tears welling in her eyes. Alina's words reminded her why she had started this journey. It wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about inspiring others to believe in their own power to create change. The legacy of courage. Years later, Jasmine stood at the unveiling of a mural in her honor. It depicted her standing tall, surrounded by images of unity and justice. Children played nearby, their laughter a stark contrast to the heavy battles she had fought. As she gazed at the mural, an elderly Malcolm Rice approached her, his steps slow but purposeful. "You've done something extraordinary, Jasmine," he said. "You didn't just change the system, you changed hearts." Jasmine smiled, her gaze fixed on the mural. "The work isn't done, Malcolm. But at least now, we're fighting for something worth believing in." Jasmine Carter's story became a testament to the power of resilience, strategy, and collective action. It wasn't just her victory. It was a movement that proved even the most entrenched systems of oppression could be challenged and transformed. The long road to redemption. The establishment of the Citizen Oversight Board marked a pivotal victory in Jasmine Carter's battle against systemic corruption. But victory, as Jasmine quickly learned, wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning of an even harder road, rebuilding the trust of a fractured community and holding a long-neglected system accountable. The aftermath of their initial success was bittersweet. While many celebrated the Oversight Board as a milestone, others remained skeptical, their faith eroded by years of unkept promises and false hope. Jasmine knew that to truly transform the system, she couldn't stop at policy changes. She had to change the hearts and minds of the people it served, and those who served within it. Rebuilding trust. Months after the board's creation, Jasmine found herself in the heart of the city, addressing a packed auditorium of police officers, community leaders, and activists. Tension filled the room like a storm cloud, the air heavy with unspoken grievances. She began her speech slowly, deliberately. "I know many of you don't trust me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Some of you see me as an adversary. Others see me as an outsider trying to tear apart what you've built. But the truth is, I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to rebuild. Together." A murmur rippled through the audience. Jasmine pressed on. "I don't believe every officer is corrupt, and I don't believe every citizen is innocent. But I do believe that every one of us has a responsibility to uphold justice, to make this city a place where no one has to live in fear of those sworn to protect them." Her words hung in the air. Slowly, a hand went up in the back. An officer stood, his face etched with skepticism. "How can we trust this board to be fair? How can we trust you to understand what we go through every day?" Jasmine met his gaze. "Trust is earned, not demanded," she replied. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight. That's why the Oversight Board isn't just about accountability. It's about collaboration. Officers will have a voice on the board, just as community members will. We'll make decisions together, transparently." The room remained quiet, but the officer nodded, his posture softening. It was a small step, but Jasmine knew it was a step in the right direction. Uncovering new challenges. As the Oversight Board began its work, Jasmine uncovered new layers of systemic dysfunction. Budget audits revealed a pattern of misallocated funds. Millions of dollars earmarked for community programs had been funneled into military-grade equipment and other unnecessary expenditures. At the same time, reports from whistleblowers highlighted a culture of silence within the department. Younger officers who spoke out against misconduct were ostracized. Their careers effectively ended before they began. Jasmine convened an emergency meeting with the Oversight Board. "We need to address this culture of fear," she said. "If officers are too afraid to speak up, the system will never change." Malcolm Rice, now an advisor to the board, nodded in agreement. We need to establish protections for whistleblowers and create pathways for officers to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. They drafted a new policy requiring mandatory third-party investigations for all reports of misconduct. The policy was met with fierce resistance from the police union, but Jasmine refused to back down. This isn't about punishing good officers, she argued at a press conference. It's about protecting them and the people they serve. The power of the people. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued to engage with the community, hosting town halls and listening sessions in neighborhoods that had long felt neglected. At one such meeting, she met Mrs. Elena Rivera, an elderly woman whose son had been killed in a police-involved shooting years earlier. The case had been swept under the rug, with no officer held accountable. "I prayed for justice every day," Mrs. Rivera said, her voice breaking. But the system didn't care. Jasmine took her hand. "We care," she said softly, "and we'll make sure no one else has to endure what you did." Jasmine worked with the Oversight Board to re-examine old cases like Mrs. Rivera's, creating a task force dedicated to bringing transparency and closure to families. Slowly, trust began to grow. For the first time in years, the people felt seen and heard. Facing backlash, the progress was not without its challenges. As the Oversight Board gained traction, the backlash from entrenched power structures intensified. Anonymous threats became more frequent. On one occasion, Jasmine returned home to find her car vandalized, the word traitor spray-painted across its side. Laura urged her to take a step back, fearing for her safety. "You've done enough, Jasmine. Let someone else carry the torch." Jasmine shook her head. "If I back down now, it'll send the wrong message. They want to scare us into silence. We can't let them win." But the pressure took its toll. Jasmine found herself struggling with insomnia, her mind racing with the weight of her responsibilities. It was during one sleepless night that she received an unexpected call from Officer Jack Miller, the man who had once tried to humiliate her. "I need to talk," he said, his voice hesitant. "In person. An unlikely ally." When Jasmine met Jack at a small diner, she wasn't sure what to expect. He looked different, worn down, his confidence replaced with uncertainty. "I made mistakes," Jack admitted, staring at his coffee. "Big ones, but you were right. About the system, about me. I want to help, if you'll let me." Jasmine studied him carefully. "Why now?" Jack sighed. "Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. And because my silence makes me complicit." Though hesitant, Jasmine decided to give him a chance. Jack became an invaluable insider, revealing details about the inner workings of the department that even Jasmine hadn't uncovered. His cooperation led to several high-profile arrests and further cemented the Oversight Board's legitimacy. A brighter tomorrow. 2 years after the Oversight Board was established, Jasmine stood on the steps of City Hall, addressing a crowd of thousands. The city had changed in ways she once thought impossible. Police-community relations had improved. Policies were being rewritten, and the culture of silence was beginning to fade. "Change isn't easy," Jasmine said, her voice resonating with passion. "It's messy, it's painful, and it takes time. But it's worth it, because every step forward, no matter how small, brings us closer to justice." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the streets. Among them stood Mrs. Rivera, Laura, and even Jack, their faces reflecting the hope Jasmine had fought so hard to inspire. As Jasmine looked out over the sea of faces, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road to redemption was long and winding, but they were walking it together. And together, they would continue to fight for a brighter, more just future. This installment highlights the resilience required to sustain meaningful change, emphasizing the importance of collaboration, courage, and persistence in the face of adversity. It shows that redemption is a journey, not a destination, and that true progress requires the collective effort of an entire community. The legacy of courage. 3 years had passed since Jasmine Carter's bold stand against systemic corruption shook the city. The Citizen Oversight Board, once met with skepticism and resistance, had become a model for reform, inspiring other cities across the nation to adopt similar measures. Yet Jasmine knew that her mission was far from over. Each victory was a step forward, but the road to true justice was a marathon, not a sprint. The weight of her work had begun to take its toll. Though she rarely spoke of it, Jasmine often felt the heavy burden of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. She had become a symbol of resilience and hope, a leader others looked to in their darkest moments. But as the movement grew, so did the demands on her time, energy, and spirit. A new threat. It was a crisp autumn morning when Jasmine received an ominous email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "Know your limits." Attached was a dossier containing personal information about her family and close friends, accompanied by a warning. "Stop now, or they pay the price." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat as she read the message. It was a stark reminder that the forces she was fighting weren't just corrupt. They were ruthless. She immediately forwarded the email to Laura, who had become her closest confidant and the unofficial second-in-command of their movement. "Whoever sent this knows exactly where to hit us," Jasmine said during an emergency meeting. "But backing down isn't an option. If we show fear, they'll double down." Laura nodded. "Agreed. But we need to be smart. Let's bring in cybersecurity experts to trace the sender. And maybe it's time to revisit the idea of personal security for you." Jasmine hesitated but eventually relented. She hated the thought of living under constant surveillance, but she couldn't ignore the threat to those she loved. A network of hope. Amid the rising tensions, Jasmine found solace in the growing network of activists, reformers, and everyday citizens who had joined her cause. What had started as a local fight had blossomed into a national movement, with communities from coast to coast rallying for transparency and justice. One of her most loyal allies was Malik Green, a former prosecutor who had left his position to join the movement after witnessing the inequities in the criminal justice system. Together, they worked on a new initiative, a mentorship program aimed at bridging the gap between law enforcement and underserved communities. "This isn't just about holding people accountable," Malik said during a planning session. "It's about creating a new culture, one where trust and collaboration replace fear and division." The program, dubbed Bridging the Divide, paired officers with local youth, fostering open dialogue and mutual understanding. It was met with cautious optimism, but early successes gave Jasmine hope that real change was possible. A shattering betrayal. Just as the movement seemed to gain unstoppable momentum, Jasmine faced an unexpected betrayal. One of her trusted allies on the Citizen Oversight Board, a man named David Connolly, was exposed as a mole. Documents revealed that he had been leaking confidential information to high-ranking officials within the police union, who used it to undermine reforms and discredit the board's work. The revelation sent shockwaves through Jasmine's team. Connolly had been a vocal supporter of the movement, his passion seemingly genuine. The betrayal cut deep, shaking the trust Jasmine had worked so hard to build. "How could we not see this coming?" Laura asked, her frustration evident. Jasmine remained calm, though her heart ached with anger and disappointment. "We can't afford to dwell on it. Betrayals like this are inevitable when you're fighting against powerful interests. What matters is how we respond." They held a press conference, addressing the betrayal head-on. Jasmine's voice was firm and resolute as she spoke to the crowd. "This movement isn't about one person, one board, or one policy. It's about all of us. And no betrayal, no matter how devastating, can stop us from pursuing justice." The turning point. The betrayal galvanized the movement. Supporters rallied around Jasmine, their determination reignited by her steadfast leadership. But Jasmine knew that they needed more than resilience. They needed a decisive victory. That victory came in the form of a groundbreaking piece of legislation. Dubbed the Justice Accountability Act, the bill proposed sweeping reforms, including independent investigations for officer misconduct, mandatory de-escalation training, and increased funding for community programs. The bill faced fierce opposition from entrenched interests. Lobbyists poured millions into campaigns to discredit the movement, and political allies of the police union launched smear campaigns against Jasmine. But she remained undeterred. Jasmine worked tirelessly, meeting with lawmakers, organizing rallies, and leveraging the full weight of the movement to push the bill forward. On the day of the final vote, thousands gathered outside the state capitol, their voices echoing through the halls of power. The vote was close, but when the results were announced, the bill had passed by a single vote. The crowd erupted into cheers. Jasmine stood at the center of the celebration, tears streaming down her face as she embraced Laura and Malik. The power of legacy. In the years that followed, the Justice Accountability Act became a model for reform across the country. Jasmine's name became synonymous with courage and justice, her story taught in schools as an example of how one person's determination could spark a movement. But Jasmine never sought the spotlight. Instead, she focused on mentoring the next generation of leaders, ensuring that the fight for justice didn't end with her. She often spoke of the importance of collective action, reminding her audience that true change required everyone to play their part. One evening, as Jasmine walked through the same neighborhood where her journey had begun, she was approached by a young woman holding a notebook. "Miss Carter," the woman said nervously, "you probably don't remember me, but I attended one of your town halls years ago. It changed my life. I'm in law school now, and I want to help continue what you started." Jasmine smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "The fight is yours now," she said, "and I have no doubt you'll carry it forward." A movement without end. As Jasmine stood on the balcony of her modest home, overlooking the city she had fought so hard to change, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The battles won, the sacrifices made, and the lives touched. It had all been worth it. The work was far from over, but Jasmine knew that the seed she had planted would continue to grow. She had ignited a movement that would outlast her, a testament to the power of resilience, collaboration, and an unyielding belief in justice. In the quiet of the evening, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." And it was. The unwritten future. Jasmine Carter had become a household name, her journey from a courageous whistleblower to a national leader for justice, an inspiration to millions. Yet, as she stood on the precipice of her next chapter, Jasmine knew that her greatest challenge wasn't behind her, it was still to come. The legacy she was building required constant vigilance, adaptation, and a deep understanding of the complexity of change. She often reflected on something her late mother had once told her. True leadership isn't about being in the spotlight. It's about lifting others into it. Jasmine had spent years living by those words, but now she felt a new weight pressing down on her. A question that lingered every night as she sat at her desk, reviewing proposals, reports, and letters. What comes next? The international stage. Jasmine's movement had grown far beyond the borders of her city. Her work inspired similar efforts in other parts of the country, but the ripple effect didn't stop there. Activists from around the world began reaching out, inviting her to share her insights and collaborate on global justice initiatives. In a quiet moment at her office, Jasmine opened an email from a coalition in South Africa. The subject line read, "Your work is needed here." The email detailed a growing movement to reform a broken police system in Johannesburg, one plagued by similar issues of corruption and abuse of power. The coalition was requesting Jasmine's presence to help galvanize their efforts. Laura, as always, offered a grounded perspective. "You've done incredible work here, Jasmine. But this is a chance to take your message to the world." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "If we can prove that these reforms work here, there's no reason they can't work anywhere. But this isn't just about exporting our ideas. It's about listening, learning, and building something together. A journey of understanding." Arriving in Johannesburg, Jasmine was greeted by a city both vibrant and fraught with tension. She was struck by the parallels between the struggles of the community there and those she had fought against back home. Yet there were also stark differences, cultural nuances, historical contexts, and unique challenges that required her to take a step back and listen. During a community forum, Jasmine met Ayanda, a young activist who had been organizing peaceful protests for years. Ayanda's passion reminded Jasmine of her younger self, but the weight of frustration was evident in her every word. "We've tried everything," Ayanda said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Protests, petitions, even legal battles, but the system here feels immovable." Jasmine placed a reassuring hand on Ayanda's shoulder. "I know that feeling," she said, "but no system is truly immovable. It's the people who make the system, and it's the people who can change it." Together, they began drafting a roadmap for reform, incorporating lessons from Jasmine's experiences while adapting them to Johannesburg's unique context. Jasmine emphasized the importance of coalition building, ensuring that every voice, no matter how small, was included in the process. The cost of change. Back in the United States, Jasmine's absence didn't go unnoticed. Detractors seized the opportunity to question her commitment to her home city, framing her international work as abandonment. News outlets ran stories questioning the sustainability of the reforms she had championed, fueling doubts among even her most loyal supporters. Laura worked tirelessly to manage the fallout, organizing town halls and press conferences to reassure the public. But the strain on their team was palpable. When Jasmine returned, she found a movement that, while still strong, was beginning to fray at the edges. In a late-night meeting with Laura and Malik, Jasmine addressed the elephant in the room. "I've been so focused on expanding the movement that I've neglected the roots," she admitted. "We can't grow without a solid foundation." Malik leaned forward. "Then let's shore up those roots. We've always known this was a long game." Together, they devised a plan to reinvest in the local community, doubling down on education initiatives, mentorship programs, and restorative justice practices. Jasmine personally visited schools, neighborhoods, and precincts, reigniting the sense of hope and unity that had defined the early days of the movement. The power of technology. As the movement evolved, Jasmine recognized the potential of technology to amplify their efforts. She partnered with innovators to develop an app called Justice Lens, a platform designed to promote transparency and accountability. The app allowed users to report incidents of misconduct, access legal resources, and track the progress of reform initiatives in real time. The launch of Justice Lens was a game-changer. Within weeks, it became a vital tool for citizens and activists, empowering communities to take an active role in shaping their justice systems. It also provided data that Jasmine's team used to identify trends and advocate for targeted reforms. During a press conference unveiling the app, Jasmine spoke passionately about its potential. "Technology won't solve every problem, but it can bridge gaps and bring people together. Justice Lens isn't just an app, it's a tool for empowerment." The final push. As the 5th anniversary of the Citizen Oversight Board's creation approached, Jasmine and her team prepared for what they hoped would be their most significant achievement yet, a national summit on systemic reform. The summit would bring together activists, policymakers, law enforcement officials, and community leaders from across the country to share strategies, celebrate successes, and tackle remaining challenges. The event was held in the city's largest convention center, its halls filled with people from all walks of life. Jasmine's keynote address was the highlight of the evening. 5 years ago, we set out to prove that change was possible, she began. Today, we stand as proof, not just that change can happen, but that it can endure. The journey isn't over, and the fight isn't easy, but every step forward brings us closer to the future we deserve. As she spoke, the audience erupted into applause. For a moment, Jasmine allowed herself to feel the enormity of what they had accomplished, a legacy of hope. In the years that followed, Jasmine continued her work, always mindful of her mother's words about lifting others into the spotlight. She stepped back from the front lines, focusing on mentorship and ensuring the movement's sustainability. One day, as she walked through a park, she noticed a mural painted on the side of a community center. It depicted a group of people, diverse, determined, and united, standing beneath the words, "The future we build together." Jasmine smiled, her heart swelling with pride. A young girl approached her, holding a notebook and a hopeful expression. "Are you Jasmine Carter?" she asked. "I am," Jasmine replied. The girl beamed. "I want to be like you someday." Jasmine knelt to the girl's level, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't need to be like me. You have your own story to write. Just remember, the power to change the world is already in you." And with those words, Jasmine Carter continued forward, knowing that her legacy wasn't just the changes she had helped create, it was the countless lives she had inspired to keep fighting for a better future. This concluding part underscores the enduring impact of Jasmine's work, illustrating her shift from direct leadership to empowering others, while emphasizing the universal potential for change and progress. A legacy of change. As the years turned into decades, Jasmine Carter's name became synonymous with resilience, justice, and the unyielding pursuit of equity. Her movement had transcended borders, inspiring countless others to challenge broken systems and demand accountability. Yet, Jasmine never saw herself as a hero. She often said, "I'm just one person, and this fight was never about me. It was about all of us." Jasmine eventually retired from the spotlight, choosing to live quietly in the city where her journey had begun. She spent her days mentoring young activists, writing about her experiences, and enjoying the simple pleasures she had once sacrificed for the cause. Her home became a gathering place for people seeking guidance, her wisdom and warmth creating a safe haven for those carrying the torch she had lit. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jasmine sat on her porch, surrounded by a group of students eager to hear her story. One of them, a young woman named Alina, asked, "Ms. Carter, after everything you've been through, what's the most important lesson you've learned?" Jasmine smiled, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of her years. "Change is a journey, not a destination," she said. "It's not about perfection or immediate results. It's about progress, about taking one step forward, then another, even when it feels like the world is pulling you back." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The most important thing is to believe in the power of people. Alone, we can do a lot, but together, we can change the world. Never underestimate the strength of unity, the courage of speaking up, and the impact of small, consistent actions. Each of you has that power. Use it wisely." A lesson for all. Jasmine's story became more than a narrative of triumph. It was a blueprint for hope and action. It taught that while the fight for justice is long and often grueling, it is also filled with moments of profound progress in humanity. Her journey reminded people that courage is contagious. One act of bravery can inspire a movement, proving that even the smallest spark can ignite a fire. Collaboration is key. True change happens when diverse voices come together, united by a common goal. Persistence wins. Change is never immediate, and setbacks are inevitable, but perseverance and adaptability ensure that progress continues. Everyone has a role. From activists to policymakers, from educators to everyday citizens, every contribution matters in building a just society, a world transformed. Decades after Jasmine's first stand against corruption, her city, and the world, had become a better place. The systems she had fought to reform were no longer perfect, but they were fairer, more transparent, and more accountable. Communities once divided by fear and distrust now worked together, building bridges where there had once been walls. And while Jasmine's physical presence eventually faded, her legacy lived on. Schools named after her taught children about her journey, ensuring that the lessons of her life would never be forgotten. Activists around the globe carried her words in their hearts. Change begins with one, but it is achieved by many. Jasmine Carter's story wasn't just about fighting for justice. It was about showing the world that a single decision, fueled by courage and conviction, could change the course of history. Her life served as a powerful reminder that the future is unwritten, waiting for ordinary people to make it extraordinary. As the young students left her porch that evening, inspired and determined, Jasmine watched them disappear into the twilight. She smiled to herself, knowing that the future was in good hands. The fight for justice would continue, carried forward by those she had inspired, proving once and for all that the power to change the world lies within each of us. And that was her greatest victory. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.